A big hello to you, and I hope I find you well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you back here to the garden, where we're going to be continuing our rebuild of the O-Gauge Garden Railway. In today's video, I'm going to be working on the last of the substructure that'll finally allow the last loop of track to go in, and ultimately will pave the way for us to be able to start running trains fully all the way round the loop. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves because there's still quite a lot to do, and I hope you're going to enjoy this journey today as I take you through the latest projects here on the Garden Railway. But first, I thought it'd be nice to get some trains running. Haven't actually had anything running for quite some time, so it took a little bit of elbow grease on the track, and it's quite surprising just how brown the Pico track can become when exposed to all weathers, but it doesn't take too long to get it back up and running. I made full use of the Hornby HM7000TXS sound decoders on this locomotive, and you can see that even with a cursory clean of the track, it's performed really well, with all the sound working just as you would expect. Playing with the trains is fun, but at the moment it's simply a case of them going out and back. And I've never been one for playing shunting, so what I really want is to be able to set a train going and sit back and relax. So in today's video, we're going to get some of the important work done to do that. Today's video comes in association with Train-O-Matic, makers of DCT decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest logo.
Last time we finished off having built some of the substructure, but there was still quite a lot left to do. So the first thing that I did when I went out was to start work laying a few more of the bricks where I finished last time. Again, I used a sharp sand for the cement mix, and I just find this to be a nice, strong, workable sand to use for this kind of work. The brickwork isn't really intended to be seen, and I will be burying in earth up to the edge, so I didn't have to be too neat in the process. I do quite like laying bricks. I find it a very therapeutic process, and like I explained last time, this is just something that I learnt from my father, and it's quite relaxing to just slowly build my way around. Now, here at the back, the level of the original O-Gauge Garden Railway was quite a bit lower, so it just made sense to build it up with bricks rather than lay concrete, which is what I'm going to be doing a little bit further on, where the gradient means that I don't need quite so much material to make a reasonably flat substructure. I used a piece of wood with a spirit level just to roughly get the levels right. But I've got a technique for final levelling the track, so you don't have to get just too obsessed with very precise levels as we go. Now, unfortunately, when I came to record the next bit with mixing up the concrete, my camera didn't record it, and I didn't realise until after I was complete. So what you're seeing here is the concrete butted up to the brick layer, and if you're wondering about that solitary brick embedded into the concrete part way along, that was very carefully measured as a datum point. So the top face of that is where the base of the track needs to rest, and I left it in there as a really good way of making sure that the concrete didn't creep up or down in level as I went. Once I'd given the concrete a good 24 to 36 hours to set, it was okay then to get to work on test laying some of the track, and really just to get a feel of what track I was going to need. It's a bit tighter at this end of the garden railway, so I've got all of this track that was salvaged from the original incarnation of the O-Gauge Garden Railway, and it's just simply a case of just test fitting various pieces together to make sure that it fits, but also to avoid having any steep kinky curves, because the O-Gauge locomotives in stock are actually quite unforgiving. They do need quite a large circle to turn, and if you don't give them that, then you get things like buffer locks. So I've been using a lot of the Pico set track curves that I had, and this is very much the minimum radius that the O-Gauge stock will take, and it does give a very much easier process to getting a good curve on this piece of track. One of the other things that I needed to make sure of was getting the track lined up so there's no kinks or sudden changes in gradient between the new track and the track that we've already built in. And what quickly became apparent was that a bit of digging out was needed to just make sure that everything lined up. And this is down to the conifer tree that I've had taken down, causing the ground to heave and move apart. And it's actually changed where the sweet spot is for the track. So it's not really a problem because I'm digging out a whole area of the track bed that had kind of risen and humped up and was all cracked up. And I always planned to lay fresh concrete in this area, but it did mean that I had to do quite a bit of digging just to make sure that I had space for a decent raft of concrete to go in. One of the things that I decided to do, just to kind of use up some of the concrete detritus from the previous track bed, and also to minimise the amount of new concrete that I was going to be laying, is that I fitted in some of the broken chunks of concrete which will form part of the sub base, and the new concrete would just be flowed over the top. It just saves having to throw stuff away and reduces the volume of concrete required. And one of the things that I did make sure that I did was to wash all of the earth off this before it went in and got concreted. And there's just a quick check with a long curve that I've got here just to make sure that I've got the new base exactly where I want it to be, and that once I lay the concrete, the track will be exactly where it needs to be. Around this side of the garden railway, I found that space was really, really tight. So it took a great deal of work just to figure out where exactly the right place for the track was. And I ended up using 6 of the set track curves in a row. And actually, this is something which I can highly recommend using the set track because it gives you a nice clean radius. The track holds its shape, and you don't need to do any trimming because everything is as it should be in terms of the length of the inner and the outer rail. It also means that there's no risk that there would be with FlexiTrack, where you can kind of go underneath the minimum radius and end up with track that turns out to be too tight to run the trains round. I also had a point left over. It's a set track point, and this is from the previous garden railway, and the curved line on this is exactly the same radius as the set track. So it was an ideal opportunity to fit this in and just get some kind of visual interest into the layout and provide another siding just to give something other than a straight circuit. Once the loose placement was where I was happy with, I could see where I needed to concrete, and it was time to take the track off for prep. The first thing to do when prepping the track for soldering up into longer lengths is to clean off the oxide. Now, this Pico track has been salvaged from the garden and has been neglected for a number of years, so you can imagine just how brown with oxide it goes. It does come off, and the track is none the worse for it, but if you're going to be soldering, you do need a degree of cleanliness on this. So cleaning the tops of the track, we're going to have to do that anyway before trains can run, and it gives us a good starting point for getting everything nice and clean. I also made use of a fiberglass pen, and this is a good way of just scrubbing where you're going to be soldering at the ends. And I also made sure that we had some solder tabs where I'm going to be putting some bridging wires across between the different full lengths of track, but just getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Now, the idea behind this here now is I soldered together 3 of the set track pieces to make a 1 yard length approximately, and this just helps to keep the radius absolutely true and reduces the amount of electrical gaps out on the layout which need to be bridged. And I just thought that this was a much more user-friendly way of laying the track based on experiences on the previous part of the build. Now, the soldering takes a little bit longer because of some of the oxide, but just use plenty of flux and don't be frightened of reapplying more flux and just taking your time. And you can solder everything together really quite easily. As said before as well, I added some solder tabs to the sides of the rails at each end of these new 1 yard lengths, and that just means that when I'm soldering in the garden to put the wire jump bridges across for electrical continuity, it just makes things so much easier because you've pre-tinned the sides of the rails. And believe me, soldering outdoors it's just a little bit tricky because you're down at ground level and you've got the wind as well, which is trying to permanently cool your iron, cool the piece that you're working on. So anything that you can do in your workshop in a more controlled environment really does help things along. After doing the first length of track, I then moved over and did the second 1 yard length. This included the point, but it's really no different soldering this in than anything else. And the set track points, they're actually unifrog, which means that you really just don't need to worry about any of the wiring on these. It all just takes care of itself, which is perfect for in the garden. Back out in the garden, it's just time for a quick test fit, and really it's just a case of placing back down those soldered together lengths, and as the old adage is, measure twice, cut once. This just is a final reassurance that the track is going where we want it to, and really importantly that it's going to line up with the track that's already laid out there. With it all lined up, it's great to see that it actually does match with what was built last year quite well, and the fact that this is all weathered in and the plant life has grown up does bode well that this is going to be something special. Now, the new bits do look quite barren at the moment, but that's only temporary, and I'm really looking forward to getting everything in and running and then starting the gardening to go around it as well. The following day, I mixed up the concrete to fill in this final bit of the track bed, and I used a 1 part grit sand, 1 part 10 mil gravel to about half a part of the cement powder, and it made up into a pretty reasonable mix, and it's just a case of working it in with the trowel. And it was just a little bit on the short side, but what you have to remember is that the ballasting will make up a lot of the difference, so you don't need to get too worried about getting this to exactly the right height for the sleeper. Now, I used a piece of wood and the spirit level just to make sure that this was about right on the levels, And I actually find concreting very, very therapeutic. So it was quite an enjoyable process. Plus, it looks like progress has happened when you're all done. And then once that's all in, it's just a case of leave it be for 24 to 36 hours just for that concrete to set, because you don't want to apply any stresses to it, because even though it may seem to be set, if you don't leave it long enough, you can end up it will collapse under any weight applied to it. Once all the concrete is set, it's a case again of test fitting that track, and it all just fits in quite nicely. There's just a bit of track now to get prepped for joining the new curve with the existing track. And this is always going to be the fiddly bit, and I used a length of flexi track here, and it just took a great deal of time to make sure that I got the flexi track exactly the right curve and right length. And it's really important again that there's no kinks between any of these bits of track. They can quite easily creep in because the existing track is already fixed in the concrete ballasting base. So it really does pay to take a bit of time to get everything lined up, and you do get a bit of flexibility in this because I did make the concrete base quite wide, and there's the means to just take up any of the slack around the back of the layout, where there's going to be a length of flexi track that's about 2.5 feet long, which will give plenty of scope to just give a little bit of fine tuning. Track laying is probably the most important part to ensure trouble-free running later down the line. So I just took my time and got all of the bits of track fettled and in their places, and it's really pleasing to see this nice smooth curve. There are a couple of places where the track comes very, very close to the edge, but this is all going to get fixed with the ballasting. The next step is just solder some bridging wires across anywhere where we've got an expansion joint left for a heat expansion. Just need some bridging wires. And then I'm on to the final leveling of the track, and this is a method that I kind of pioneered in last year's build, just making a couple of holes underneath particular sleepers, maybe every foot to foot and a half, and then I put in a roll plug and a screw, and this allows the track to sit on top of the screws, and with the aid of a screwdriver I can just make sure that the height is absolutely perfect. Just adjust the screw in and out and use a spirit level to make sure that all is well, and I also use a hot glue gun to final fix the track to these screws once I'm happy with the height. And it's important to make sure that not only is the gradient either very, very smooth or non-existent, but also the side to side is quite important as well. And once all you're happy with that, then just hot glue gun between the bottom of the sleepers and the top of the screw just stops the track from moving about, and it will also stop it from floating up when we do the ballasting later down the line. You don't really need to do this all the way round. I just happen to have a bit of a hollow here, so it made sense to support the track in this way. Further round, the concrete base was absolutely level and at the right height, so I didn't really need to bother. But this again all goes into making sure that everything runs really reliably later on down the line. And the last thing you want with a garden railway is frequent derailments, because that will just drive you insane. And the hot glue gun is one that I picked up cheaply. I used it on the previous bits of the build, but it really does make things so easy out in the garden because things just grip instantly. And as long as the glue is underneath the sleeper level, then it just gets hidden by the ballast, so you don't actually ever end up seeing that. And it's a little bit of a tedious task, but it's well worth it for reliable running. Once I got all the track down, then the next step is to do a test run. And it's as good an excuse as any to get out a locomotive and have a play about, but it does serve a very important purpose in making sure that there's no clangers in the new track work and that the locomotive will happily make it through without any derailments or any significant lurches on rail joints. So making its way through from the existing part of the Garden Railway, the test locomotive very quickly made its way onto the new track. Now it's not ballasted, and there's reason for this because the ballasting is quite permanent using a cement mix. I wanted to make sure that all was well before we kind of encased this permanently. The track will sag a little bit under the weight of the locomotive because at the moment it's not fully supported, but that doesn't matter too much as long as there's no derailments. And this locomotive really did take it in its stride, and it's really nice to see finally I've got some new track that the trains will run on, and it's only a matter of time now before I get the full Garden Railway up and running. And whilst I had it out, it was as well just to give it a run over the full Garden Railway. Now, I hope you've really enjoyed today's video and found it informative, and don't forget to stay tuned for the next episode where I'm going to be working on the ballasting and finally getting trains to run on the full circuit of the Garden Railway. Please do hit that like button and share this video to social media, and if you've not already done so, then do please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying I'd love to hear from you in the comments section about maybe your own Garden Railway build. What did you think of this Garden Railway build? And I'll catch you next time. Happy modelling, and bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Train-O-Matic, makers of DCT decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com, and don't miss out on your latest loco.
I'd like to thank everybody over on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to our Patreon heroes. Without you guys over on Patreon, we really wouldn't be able to keep making the video content that you see on this channel. And don't forget that you can also head on over to patreon.com/JenniferKirk and check out the different tiers of rewards. Thank you so much. You are absolute legends.